Honourable members, it being 6 p.m, the debate is interrupted for the condolence motion. I draw the attention of honourable members to the passing of the Honourable Keith John Austin Asche AC KC, former Administrator and Chief Justice of the Northern Territory. On behalf of honourable members, I extend a warm welcome to the family and friends of the Honourable Austin Asche. I remind honourable members that on completion of this debate, I will ask members to stand in silence for 1 minute as a mark of respect. I call the Chief Minister.
Madam Speaker, I move that this Assembly expresses its deep condolences to the family and friends of the Honourable Austin Asche AC KC, former Administrator and Chief Justice of the Northern Territory. Madam Speaker, in the House tonight, we honour the life of the Honourable Austin Asche AC KC, and I acknowledge in the gallery his family and friends who are with us this evening. And not so long ago, we farewelled Austin at a beautiful state funeral. In remembering him, we pay tribute to a legacy of wisdom, fairness and service that will endure for generations to come. Austin Asche was, in every sense of the word, a gentleman. He saw the best in those around him, and his fairness and loyalty to his friends, family and the many organisations he served were untiring. His curiosity and interest in people and ideas were the hallmark of his personality. His service to our nation began in 1944 when he joined the Royal Australian Air Force during World War II. His dedication to justice led him to a distinguished legal career, culminating in his appointment as Chief Justice of the Northern Territory from 1987 to 1993. His tenure as Administrator of the Northern Territory from 1993 to 1997 reinforced his deep love for this place and its people. He understood the strength of a society lay in its ability to learn and adapt, and he devoted much of his later years to fostering the next generation of leaders. As a judge, he was particularly mindful of the challenges faced by families, advocating for the protection of vulnerable people long before these issues became a normal part of the national conversation. He was immensely proud to witness the increasing representation of women in the legal profession and took great satisfaction in knowing that the first female judge of the Northern Territory Supreme Court was in fact appointed under his leadership. Austin was a proud Territorian. His deep connection to the Northern Territory made his tenure as Chief Justice and later as Administrator all the more meaningful to him. His sense of humour was warm and ever-present, filled with the kind of wisdom and wit that made his words linger long after they were spoken. But beyond his lightheartedness, Austin was a man of great principle. A keen sportsman, Austin played tennis well into his 90s with the East Point Gentlemen's Tennis Club, where he relished the camaraderie as much as the sport itself. To his family, Austin was a devoted husband, father, grandfather and great-grandfather. In his final days, members of his extended family travelled to be by his side, a testament to the love and respect he inspired in them. Austin Asche leaves behind a legacy that is felt in every corner of the Northern Territory. On behalf of a grateful Territory, we extend our deepest condolences to his family and loved ones. The state funeral, Madam Speaker, provided an opportunity for many to come together and not only mourn the loss of Austin, but celebrate his long and successful life. And we heard stories from people who gave eulogies about the vast experiences and achievements he had over his lifetime. And certainly the legacy he left on the legal profession is indelible, but also within the community. And I certainly know in my own experience, Madam Speaker, last year at the Territory Training Awards, unfortunately Austin wasn't able to be there, but he was absolutely missed. And to see young people at the Training Awards, which is obviously a large component of what we're celebrating, lamenting that he wasn't there, missing him, reflecting on the years gone by of how he was always there. It really made a significant impression on me, the impression that Austin had made on them. And I think that is the hallmark and character of the man. In one special celebration, his absence was so profoundly noted and missed, and that is the way he just had about himself. And equally, and I mentioned this in my eulogy, Madam Speaker, missing him on days like bombing of Darwin, where he would always be there. And of course, Wendy, you've just been a pillar of strength and support to him and your entire family. It really is truly the most incredible love and devotion and dedication you have shown, such kindness to your father. And I know he deserved every moment of it, but it's still an absolute credit to you, the way in which you cared for him right to the very end. May we all carry forward his lessons, his pursuit of fairness, his belief in learning, his love of books, and his kindness towards others. Rest in peace, Austin. We cherish the contribution you made to the Northern Territory. We are proud to have honoured you with a state funeral and a condolence motion in the Parliament this evening. Your work is done, but your legacy will never, ever fade. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I am honoured to rise today to acknowledge one of the Territory's greatest sons, the Honourable Austin Asche AC KC. I extend my sincere condolences on behalf of my Territory Labor colleagues to Mr Ashe's family, his friends, his former colleagues of his passing on the 14th of December 2024. Born in Melbourne, Mr Ashe's connection to the Northern Territory began early with his education at Darwin Primary School. He went on to serve the Royal Australian Air Force during the final days of World War II before studying law at Melbourne University. His honour was first admitted to the Queensland Bar, marking the beginning of a distinguished career in law, one that saw him rise to the roles of Chief Justice of the Northern Territory and later the 15th Administrator of the Northern Territory, serving in that role from 1993 to 1997. Throughout his career, he and his late wife, prominent microbiologist Dr. Valerie Asche, by his side, represented the Northern Territory in many aspects. For nearly 80 years, Mr Asche dedicated his life to shaping the Northern Territory and strengthening our communities. He was a champion of education, a fierce advocate of justice, and a staunch believer in fairness and opportunity for all. His honour's remarkable legacy here in the Northern Territory does not end with his passing. It does not end when we conclude our speeches here today, and it does not end when we leave this chamber of the Northern Territory Parliament. Madam Speaker, his honour's impact will live on through the institutions he strengthened, the people he mentored, and the ideals that he championed. Mr Ashe's passing is indeed sad for us all. The passion that he had for education and the learning that never faded right up until he passed. Even after retiring from public office, he remained deeply engaged in mentoring young lawyers and supporting students to ensure that future generations would benefit from his wisdom and experience. He served as the Chancellor of Charles Darwin University, where he was instrumental in guiding its development into the world-class institution we are proud to call it today. Mr Asche understood that education is a great equaliser, the foundation of opportunity, and he worked tirelessly to ensure that every Territorian had the chance to build a better future, and particularly through education. His honour's contributions to the legal community were equally profound. He was a trusted voice of reason, a defender of justice, and a role model for those who wanted to follow in his footsteps. His unwavering integrity, fairness, dedication to the Territory lawmaking, which helped shape the Northern Territory's legal landscape today. Mr Asche was a mentor, a leader, and a friend to so many who had the privilege of working with him and learning from him. Beyond the many titles and accomplishments, Austin Asche was a man of deep kindness, humility, and generosity. He gave his time freely. He listened, he cared, and he believed in lifting others up, particularly here in the Northern Territory. He carried a genuine love for the Northern Territory and its people, and his dedication to community service never wavered. Whether through his work in the courts, in government, in education, or in countless community organisation, Mr. Ashe always sought to give back. Madam Speaker, I was fortunate to first meet Mr. Ashe in my former role as the Minister for Workforce Training at the annual NT Training Awards. The prestigious Austin Ashe Apprentice of the Year Award has been aptly named to honour the lifelong work of Mr. Ashe, which will now continue in his legacy for the Northern Territory. I was told on good authority, Madam Speaker, when I first met Mr. Ashe, that he used to energetically cross the stage and perform some aerobatics and some quite tricky manoeuvres, Madam Speaker, and then sometimes off the stage in the same manner. Unfortunately, by the time I had met Mr. Ashe, his honour had slowed down a bit with his body, but I'm told his mind was equally as sharp. And later, the awards every year, unfortunately, except for last year, as the Chief Minister has said, he was there to proudly represent and to foster the future education of the Northern Territory. Madam Speaker, as we reflect on his honour's lifelong commitment to justice, education, community service, it reminds me, while we are all here, no matter what side of the chamber we stand on in this place, to make the Territory an even better place than what it already is. People like Mr. Ashe have made a real, long-lasting difference to the lives of fellow Territorians. And it is in this spirit, Madam Speaker, that I believe all of us in this chamber should strive to serve our communities. The Territory has been privileged to have had such an extraordinary leader, mentor and advocate as our Chief Justice and Administrator of the Northern Territory. But those titles only scratch the surface of the impact he had, Madam Speaker. His honour's real legacy is found in the thousands of lives that he touched, he mentored and he inspired to help build the Northern Territory. His honour's legacy will endure for generations to come in every student who walks in the halls of Charles Darwin University, in every young lawyer who steps into the courtroom with a commitment to justice, and in every Territorian who believes that service to the community is of the highest calling. Madam Speaker, we say farewell to an exceptional man, but we do so in the knowledge and the gratefulness of the impact of his life that will have forever on the Territory. On behalf of our Territory Labor team, I offer my sincere condolences to Mr. Ashe's children, Wendy and Harry, to the grandchildren and all the members, family and former colleagues of Mr. Ashe. May he rest in peace.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely plays. They all have their exits and their entrances. And one man, in his time, plays many parts. Madam Speaker, I rise this evening to speak to the many parts of the rich life lived by a Shakespearean, the Honourable Austin Asche AC KC. His Honour passed away in December 2024 at the age of 99, leaving behind an extraordinary legacy of service, leadership and dedication to the Northern Territory. Austin Ashe was born in Melbourne on the 28th of November 1925. He grew up in Darwin and his early education was at Darwin Primary School. He served in the RAF during the final years of the Second World War. He studied law at the University of Melbourne. He graduated with a BA and then an LLM and then was admitted to the Queensland Bar before being called to the Victorian Bar in 1954, where he practiced for 20 plus years. He took silk in 1972 and in 1976 was appointed to the newly formed Federal Family Court of Australia. He served as a Supreme Court judge of the Northern Territory and later as Chief Justice from 1987 to 1993. He was made a companion in the Order of Australia in 1994. And in 1993, he resigned that Chief Justiceship to assume the role of being the 15th Administrator of the NT, serving from the 1st of March 1993 to the 16th of February 1997. These are the bald facts and particulars of His Honour's life and career. My focus tonight, however, is His Honour's contribution as President of the Law Reform Committee of the Northern Territory for over 20 years, from 1997 to 2018. I choose to focus on this because, quite deliberately, I want to engage with more than just those bare bullet points and try to shine a light upon His Honour's depth of commitment to the laws of the Northern Territory. His Honour's period of contribution as Chair was between 1997 and 2018, over which period he was aged between 71 and 92. Stop to think about that for a second. Whilst everyone else at age 70 might have gone out and played a round of golf or two, Austin Ash decided to devote himself for the best part of another 20 years to chairing a law reform committee. Notwithstanding that he was a fine sportsman, of course, he did row in pairs and fours and eights in his younger years, and as the Chief Minister pointed out, he was also playing competitive tennis well into his 90s. But in his capacity as chair, under his presidency, that committee produced a staggering 26 reports. A staggering body of work that I would wager to say surpasses the combined volume written output of probably all the MLAs in this room combined. With the exception of one report, he was involved in every one of those, and of the 25 subcommittees responsible for examining the complex legal issues involved, he prepared the majority of the reports. In fact, he drafted a lot of the stuff himself, and his fingerprints are visible, sometimes subtly, other times more blatantly and cheekily in the reports that he wrote. The start of the Uniform Evidence Act Report 2006 begins with a Dickensian quote from the chapter 34 of the Pickwick Papers. "Oh, quite enough to get, sir, as the soldiers said then. They ordered him 350 lashes," replied Sam. "You must not tell us what the soldier or any other man said, sir," interposed the judge. "It's not evidence." Looking at the 26 reports gives you an idea of the importance of the subject matter and the hard work that was involved in those 26 reports. To cite just a few of them, Report 18, the report on the law of property for the NT. Report 23, privilege against self-incrimination. Report 25, the right to silence. Report 26, the whistleblower legislation. Report 28, Aboriginal customary law. Report 30, the Uniform Evidence Act. Report 36, defendants submitting to psychiatric or other medical examination. Report 39, self-induced intoxication. Report 43, non-consensual sharing of intimate images. He did all of this voluntarily, without even being remunerated for his efforts. Not for a penny did he have a hand in 26 Law Reform Committee reports. Now, many of these reports provide the basis for important changes in the law that are still with us today in the Northern Territory. Indulge me to provide just 3 examples. Report 18 on the law of property for the Northern Territory from October 1998 led to the Law of Property Act 2000. Now, this is a particularly good example of the importance of the Law Reform Committee's work because no one ever talks about general NT property law as opposed to residential tenancies, and that's because the Law of Property Act 2000 is a particularly good piece of legislation. It's clear, it's comprehensible, it's fair, it's based on established legal principles, and it's therefore very predictable. A second example is Report 30 on the Uniform Evidence Act from September 2006, which led to the National Uniform Legislation Act 2011 in the NT, which is used every day in courts in this jurisdiction and brings us into line with every other Australian jurisdiction on a matter of significant importance. Report 43 on the non-consensual sharing of intimate images similarly led to the Criminal Code amendments and the Criminal Code Amendment Intimate Images Act 2018. So as you can see, he wasn't just a hobbyist, he was actively reforming our laws from the sidelines in the most appropriate manner. And some of the reports he authored, penned or contributed to result in recommendations to do nothing, which is advice that's equally important as recommendations to make changes. For example, Report 25 on the right to silence, 2002. Now that report finishes with this paragraph, and I quote for him: "This committee believes that it can create a record with the shortest recommendation ever recorded by any law reform agency in Australia or elsewhere. The task given this committee was to consider the rationale of the UK Criminal Justice and Public Order Act, and the question essentially asked was whether it was expedient for the Northern Territory Parliament to adopt it or some variant of it. To that question, this committee records the following and only recommendation: no." Note, though, that was on page 37 of a report which before then had provided a very thorough analysis of the historical foundation of the right to silence, which explained the one-word recommendation. And therein is where we see His Honour's skillfulness. He was not just highly intelligent and articulate, he had a profound knowledge of what others had said or experienced in the past and on the same legislative topic. And what he did was deploy that knowledge and experience to the great advantage of the Northern Territory. Or to put it another way, he utilised data and research in a context-specific manner, something we should all take heed of in this House. Legislators who do not investigate and understand what lawmakers have tried in the past and where they failed or succeeded risk missing out on the benefits of that experience. It's important for this House to make sure that we continue to look out for and get the benefit of learning of scholars like His Honour. His Honour was also a fierce advocate for the Northern Territory in constitutional affairs and passionately defended the autonomy of this legislature. In the Standing Committee on Legal and Constitutional Affairs, Rights of the Terminally Ill, Euthanasia Laws Repeal Bill in June 2008, he cited at page 46, "Any Commonwealth enactment based on policy that is based on a difference of opinion between the Commonwealth and the Territory is of course an interference with self-government of the Territory. If the Commonwealth disagrees with the policy of the Territory, then the grant of self-government is really illusory." Similarly, at 47, His Honour pointed out if the size of a legislature or a jurisdiction's population became the reason to query the legitimacy of a legislature, then the Tasmanians ought to be starting to feel very uncomfortable because there are only 400,000 or so of them. If you do grant self-government to a series of bodies, then you allow them to determine themselves within their own province. If you say that the citizens of the Territory are immature, and that means that perhaps the citizens of Tasmania are just slightly more mature, and the citizens of South Australia perhaps a little bit more mature, by all means, do so. But that means that you should not be passing self-government acts. Of course, His Honour was nevertheless widely regarded as a very measured and balanced judge and careful in his remarks, to which end, on the limits of the legislature, he also had this to say. And I quote from page 36 of the report on the right to silence from March 2002. "A further reason for discouraging the presentation of such legislation in the Northern Territory is based on practical financial considerations. Assuming the Territory Parliament were the first to enact such legislation, there would be no doubt that it would be subject to at least one, and more likely several, challenges to its validity, its precise meaning and its constitutionality. Such challenges would invariably end up in the High Court, accompanied not only by counsel for the Territory and the appellant, but also, no doubt, by a galaxy of legal talent seeking to intervene on behalf of various states or interested parties. The subsequent expense for the Territory would be enormous, and whilst this committee has no desire to discourage legislative pioneering, there may be better causes for the Territory than to lead the way in an expedition which may well prove to have the same frustrations and expenses as that undertaken by Messrs Burke and Wills." Madam Speaker, the Honourable Austin Ash was truly a gentleman and truly a scholar. The NT was blessed to be gifted by his legal talents. His life was one of exemplary service in the judiciary, but also the military, as an administrator and as an educator. A separate speech adjunct to this one might have reflected on his contributions to our local university as Chancellor, amongst other things. He was a public servant of the highest order, the calibre of which is seldom found and unlikely to be replicated. His memory will be cherished by all who are privileged to know him. His example of leading with humility, grace and substance will continue to guide. Verily, to God we belong, and to him we shall return. Vale, Austin Ash.
Member for Johnston.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to also pay my respects to the Honourable Austin Asche AC KC and acknowledge his family and friends here in the chamber. And send my love to all those who feel his loss. I met Austin many times in many different contexts, and he was always warm, wise, charming and entertaining. He was certainly one of a kind who, as we've heard, contributed so much to the Northern Territory. I'd like to read out to the House some words from his friend and mine, Russell Goldflam. Russell shared his words with me and they capture Austin far better than I can, so I asked his permission to share them here. Dear Austin, 99 years of life, 999 years of wisdom, and the effervescent, ever-inquiring enthusiasm of a 9-year-old lad. I only knew you for the final quarter of your century, a mere 25 years of scholarship, leadership and friendship. I loved your strict compassion, your eccentric orthodoxy, your casual erudition, your inexhaustible store of story, trivial and profound. You ushered me through secret doors to Shakespeare, to Dickens, to your far northern forebears and their ancient sagas, to the civilised wilds of the Savage Club, but most of all to the law, both common and uncommon. Thank you. So I join with Russell and so many others who are close with Austin and are feeling his loss in sending love to Wendy, who's been so devoted in these last leaner years, and in expressing condolences to all of his family and friends. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Port Darwin.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to speak on behalf of myself and my husband, Professor Len Nataris AO, in memory of the Honourable Austin Asche AC KC. Austin was the administrator of the Northern Territory when I first moved here in 1999, and if I'm to be honest, arriving in the heat and humidity of a build-up pregnant with my second child, understanding the machinations of government and the role of the administrator of the Northern Territory were not high on my list of priorities. In the course of settling into my new life in the Territory, however, along with my husband, I found myself at a number of official engagements hosted or attended by Austin and his wife Valerie, and found myself drawn to this couple who had such passion for the Territory. Over the years, since that time, there were many occasions where our paths crossed, and on each occasion he was incredibly generous with his time, and I loved hearing his stories of the Territory he so loved. I must confess I particularly enjoyed eavesdropping on his chats with my husband Len. It's a rare occasion that Len encounters somebody who outpaces his passion for history, particularly military history or the classics. Austin, however, held the conversational edge on each and every occasion. If I may, I think the words of my husband best sum up Austin. Austin was a true bastion of respect, dignity and learning, a man of compassion and, in the truest sense, a well-rounded Renaissance man, an individual who could not only recite the classics but also understand them, applying the invaluable learnings as a true and influential citizen of our precious community. A true man for all seasons, an example of what we should all aspire to be, a credit to the law, the community, and to his enduring faith in the community. Len reminisced to me that whilst he cherished these discussions with Austins, he did on occasion avoid him when it was clear he was intent on challenging Len to a game of tennis. Quite the player in his younger days, Len told me that he knew that Austin, an accomplished player, even though he was several decades older than Len, would always come out the victor, and in any match between them. So avoidance was, in Len's view, the better part of valour in those circumstances. Len was an only child he didn't like to lose. Austin was one of those people you expect will always be there, guiding those lucky enough to fall within his circle. His leaving has left a void in the Territory that will never be filled. Vale Austin.
Member for Gwadja.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as a former Northern Territory Attorney-General, I am absolutely honoured to stand and speak tonight in honour of such a remarkable Territorian. And when we talk and when we reflect on the amazing contributions of His Honourable Austin Ash, whether it's members of the judiciary, whether it's lawyers, prosecutors, they all talk of the strength, of the warmth, and of the admiration of the Honourable Austin Ash AC QC. I think, Madam Speaker, in talking to people around the Honourable Austin Ash, what perhaps best defines Austin Ash was his remarkable kindness, humility, and generosity. He gave freely of his time, he listened deeply, and cared genuinely. His dedication to lifting others up and serving his community was always unwavering. Even after retiring from public office, his passion for mentoring and supporting the next generation remained undiminished. He continued to guide young minds, ensuring his wisdom and experience would live on through those he inspired. We reflect on his lifelong commitment to justice, to education, and to community. We are reminded of the profound impact one individual can make. His honours legacy serves as a beacon to all of us. This important legacy will continue to inspire all of us. As we reflect on Austin Ash's amazing contributions to the Northern Territory, we acknowledge how immeasurable they are. But his true legacy lives on, as others have spoken about tonight, through the lives he touched, the ideas he championed, and the community he helped build. So as we say farewell to an extraordinary leader, a mentor and an advocate, we do so knowing that his impact will continue to resonate. As we've heard through every young student who goes through Charles Darwin University in their law courses, as those lawyers enter those courtrooms, we are remembered of the legacy of Austin Ash. I want to offer my condolences to Mr. Ash's children, Wendy and Harry, and his grandchildren, and all the Ash family. But most importantly, I want to thank you all for sharing an incredible man with the Territory. And I want to acknowledge the sacrifices that you have all had to make to share your father, your grandfather with the Territory. When we talk about the Honourable Austin Ash AC QC, we hear many things, and I want to acknowledge every contribution from every member here. The Chief Minister spoke at length about the amazing contributions, the member for Fong Lim, the personal stories from the member for Port Darwin and the member for Johnson and the Leader of the Opposition. But when I remember Austin Ash, I remember a true blue Territorian, and that's how he should be remembered. Someone who was proud to call the Territory home, someone who stood up and advocated for the Northern Territory in every role that he has ever had, and that is an amazing legacy, Madam Speaker. The Territory is a better place because of the Honourable Austin Ash AC QC. Thank you.
Attorney General, Member for Brennan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Earlier this year, we celebrated the life of the Honourable Keith John Austin Ash AC KC at his state funeral. Austin Ash was 99 years old upon his passing, and he left behind a legacy of service, leadership and dedication that will be felt for many generations to come. Austin Ash was a proud Territorian. He was an exceptional leader and a devoted public servant with decades of service in the legal sector. With his deep understanding and knowledge, Austin Ash led an incredibly successful career over his years of service. He secured a status as a highly respected figure in the legal field, which ultimately culminated in his appointment as Chief Justice of the Northern Territory from 1987 to 1993. But despite being a giant in his field, Austin Ash was an extremely humble man. And before beginning his career in law, he served in the Royal Australian Air Force from 1944 to 1946. Austin Ash was devoted to delivering justice while upholding strong values of fairness, moderation and balance, all exceptional traits in a judge in a court. During his service as a judge, he was particularly mindful of the challenges faced by families, and he ensured that people, no matter what their background or circumstance, were treated with dignity and respect. Throughout his career, he was proud to see the advancement of diversity with more women entering the legal profession. And as the Chief Minister said, he was in fact appointed the first female judge of the Northern Territory of the Supreme Court, who was appointed under his leadership, of course. That was something that he took great pride in. Despite Austin Ash's long-standing legal career in the Northern Territory, it was in Victoria where he studied law at the University of Melbourne. After completing his studies, Austin began his career at the Queensland Bar before he was called to the Victorian Bar in 1954. Austin Ash practiced at the Victorian Bar for over 2 decades, and his career took a further step in 1972 when he was appointed Queen's Counsel, now known as King's Counsel. In 1976, he was the first Victorian to be appointed as a justice to the newly formed Family Court of Australia. Austin Ash brought decades of experience to the Territory, so he was very well positioned to further progress his career here. And this was clear when he was appointed Justice of the Supreme Court of the Northern Territory in 1986, and later the Chief Justice of the Court. He certainly was a busy man, Madam Speaker, also serving as Chairman of the Northern Territory Parole Board during this time. Upon his retirement from the Supreme Court bench in 1993, Austin Ash served as the 15th Administrator of the Northern Territory until 1997. And although he retired in 1997, his work didn't stop there, as we've heard tonight, serving as the Chair of the Northern Territory Law Reform Committee. He also held the roles of Adjunct Professor in Law and Emeritus Chancellor at Charles Darwin University. Madam Speaker, I was fortunate enough to meet the Honourable Austin Ash at the last training awards that he attended. So he would have been 97 or 98 years old at that time. And I'm pretty sure Wendy was there next to him. I think it was Wendy. I was actually in awe of meeting him because he is literally larger than life. He is like a rock star when you go to a function of that size and that magnitude. And I'd heard all about him, and so when I got to sit next to him, I was like, oh, I don't even know what to say to him. Like, I felt really starstruck. And it was true to form, because that whole evening he was just beaming from ear to ear and so proud of all of the award nominees and the finalists and the winners, to the point where he was just, you could tell he was really proud of the Northern Territory and who we are as people. At one stage, there was a roving mic of one of the organisers, and the camera panned down to the roving mic, and all of a sudden it was at our table, and Austin was beaming on this big screen, but he was right next to me, and they were trying to interview him. And then he was presented with a Northern Territory flag, and he put it over his shoulders and literally beamed. And I'm pretty sure there was a photo at the state funeral in the slideshow, which also made me smile when I saw that, because he really was a fantastic Territorian who contributed so much, was so proud, and just showed that. He wore all of that pride on his sleeve, which was fantastic. Austin Ash had a lifelong commitment to education and guiding the development of future leaders, and we extend our deepest condolences to Austin Ash's family and loved ones, and we thank you, for sharing his life and his legacy with all of us in the Northern Territory.
Member for Drysdale.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wished, although I did not personally know Austin Ash AC KC, I would like to touch on some readings I've come across today about his time in service, as they're quite incredible. I'd like to start with a man named Eric Ash, Austin's father. And something my father's always said is, you know, a father is the bow and the son the arrow. And when I read about Eric Ash, you can see why Austin was the man he was. So in World War I, Eric served with the Young Men's Christian Association, and he went over to Egypt. He was commended for his wholehearted enthusiasm in the service of Australian soldiers, and he was described by the YMCA's General Secretary as a high-souled patriot. On his return, Eric enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force on the 30th of April 1917, where he would then join a brigade in France. By August 1918, the Australians were paramount during the assaults on German lines and the assault on the Hindenburg lines during this phase. During this period, on the 28th of August, as a signaller, Eric Ash was awarded the Military Medal for Bravery when he kept up communications after heavy shell fire at Villeray in the vicinity of St. Quintin's Canal on the 28th and 29th of September. By this stage in World War I, it's actually hard to fathom what a bombardment looked like. It is nothing that has existed previously or since in warfare. Both the Allies and Germans had built up bombardment arsenals that are just hard to comprehend. And in some battles, you'd be looking at one shell every 10 squared meters every second. And for a man to maintain lines of communications for a night and the following day, you can imagine the bravery one would need to conduct that. And so I think that's worth acknowledging. And so then we get a sense of the father, and now to the son we honour today. Speaking of Austin's service, Austin served in the RAF for 2 years, from 1944 to 46, as a leading craftsman. And I'm going to read a few quotes from, and I will make sure, Major Paul Reisenwig, which I've probably got wrong, but this is from his 1997 publication, The Service Heritage of the Honourable Austin Ash, which was just AC at that point, the 15th Administrator of the NT. So Austin joined the RAF, and I quite enjoyed some of these quotes. So he was one of the few on the troop trains and trucks heading north who was actually pleased to be heading to Darwin. And I felt a bit of a resignation with that, with my own time and being first posted back to Darwin. In March 1945, he manned a radar station, Mitchell Head, on the southwest tip of Bathurst Island. And I'm going to fast forward to Victory in the Pacific Day, as this gives an idea of the man's sense of service. So try to picture with diggers on the very last day of the war, and this is the words of Austin Ash. We had a ration of 2 bottles of beer a week, but I think that was supplemented on that night. And quite a few did drink, and they helped out with their ration. They all wanted to go home except me. I was the only one who didn't. I didn't care how long I stayed, being an old Territory boy. goes on. I was on duty that night and made myself very unpopular with our radio operator. He had embittered freely and dozed down in the ops room floor and went soundly to sleep. About 2 a.m, I spotted an incoming plane on the radar. With great difficulty, I awoke him and I insisted that he signal this to base. He was ropeable, pointing out in forceful language that the war was over. But I had heard of the incident on the 19th of February 1942, when an observer at Bathurst had spotted a large fleet of aircraft heading to Darwin and had reported this to base and been ignored. And this had turned out to be the first Japanese raid on the Australian mainland. My reasoning was simple. The supposed surrender might have been a fiendish trick to lull us into a false sense of security, and this unknown plane with no IFF may have been proceeding to Darwin with the Japanese equivalent of the atomic bomb. I was blowed if I was going to go down in history as the radar operator who let it through. With much grumbling and some reflections on my sanity and legitimacy, the wireless operator sent the message. Although I pointed out to him that I had possibly saved both of us from a court-martial and probably a firing squad, he didn't seem the least bit grateful. And I just thought that was quite a nice piece to show that to the very end, his commitment to the territory and to fulfilling his duties. And then I'll read one more excerpt which I think speaks to a bit of the Anzac legend and the Australian larrikin that we see throughout our Anzac legends. So he speaks, and I thought it was fitting too that this happened, he speaks here of his time on the Tiwi Islands, with the Member Farafura also being a veteran himself. I thought that was quite fitting. And so he speaks from the start, the help of the Tiwi people who keenly and willingly assisted in the buildings and the erection of the tower, the filling of sandbags, and the heavy-duty task of carrying those sandbags up the hill and placing them around the radar. Then he goes on to say, and this will be the last quote I'll give, so the party, being the soldier of troops, was under the command of Flying Officer L.B. Lyons, who took the sensible view that after VP Day, that as long as the men carried out their light duties and maintained some semblance of discipline, they could be accorded some degree of freedom. Austin Ash recalled, "I'm glad to say we didn't abuse his trust and the camp was a happy one. They enjoyed relaxing camping, expeditions, fishing, surfing, bushwalking, and watched films at an outdoor cinema." To which Ash recalled, "The entertainment was always enhanced by various ribald and frequently obscene remarks from the audience as the film progressed. Sometimes the remarks were much more entertaining than the film, although the frank expressions of what the hero really had in mind for the heroine tended to destroy the atmosphere of the more romantic love scenes." And I quite enjoyed that. So the man obviously went on to achieve great things in service, but I think both the legacy left by Austin is something that, as I read about him, I found quite touching. And to his family, please know that his legacy inspires younger men like myself and that of his father as well. So I thank you, and I thank Austin for the inspiration of service that he has left on the territory. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I would also like to extend my deepest condolences to the family and friends of the Honourable Austin Ash AC KC. Thank you for sharing him with us. The question is that the condolence motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. I now ask members to stand and observe 1 minute's silence. Please be seated. I thank honourable members for their contributions to this motion tonight. There are light refreshments in the main hall for the family and friends of Mr Ashe. Thank you for attending this evening. Thank you.